What's up, gang? Kawaii50 here with another Fake Grand Order video. Now I know, gang, I said I was going to focus on the friend point servants for this week, but some big news ended up happening on JP, and I really feel like it's important that we talk about it to kind of sort of put it into perspective. Of course, if you've been following JP News, you already know that I am talking about the release of Fae Knight Lancelot, which that's what I'm going to refer to her as, just so I keep spoilers to a minimum. We need to talk about Fae Knight Lancelot arriving into the game, what impact she's going to have on the community, and what this can mean for Fake Grand Order going forward. So, if this ends up being an interesting topic for you, please consider liking and subscribing. Some of you may be asking, what's the big deal with Fae Knight Lancelot? I don't know anything about this. Well, this isn't going to be a servant breakdown at all. Instead, I'm going to talk about the aspects of her kit that are really making the community focus on her, and for good reason. The first is her third skill, Ray Horizon. Ray Horizon, upon its use, changes her from Ascension 1 or 2 into Ascension 3. That's right, it completely changes this servant's ascension. It increases her own NP gauge and gives her invincibility if she's in Ascension 1 or 2. But if she's already in Ascension 3, it increases her NP strength and gives her invincibility. Now, why does it matter that this changes her ascensions? Well, the reason it matters is because when she changes ascensions, she also changes noble phantasms. In her first ascension, she is given a single target arts type noble phantasm. However, when Lancelot reaches the third ascension, she gains an AoE Buster Noble Phantasm instead. So this is a servant with two Noble Phantasms included, both of different card types that can suit your needs depending on what the battle has in store for you. That is absolutely wacky. We haven't really seen something like this in Fake Grand Order before. The closest thing we've gotten is, of course, Ishtar and her ability to change her Noble Phantasm card types. But that's nothing compared to this. It's still powerful, but this is far, far different. But part of the reason Lancelot is so appealing is part of the reason that a lot of servants in FGO's past have been appealing. A lot of the strongest servants in Fake Grand Order have really come along and shown up by being the strongest because they have some little mechanic that is different, that really ends up looking outside the box, that ends up changing the game for so many people, changing the way you might even think about team comps, changing what ends up becoming the most viable. It's not even necessarily a meta shift because of raw numbers, it's a shift just because of something in their kit that's different. But let's go over a couple of examples to illustrate this point. Let's start, of course, with Merlin. Probably the first big game-changing servant that FGO had ever seen. Yes, his Buster and crit damage boosts are incredibly powerful, but it's the Noble Phantasm generation part of his kit, which provides not only a faster way for your team to do more damage, but also the sustainability provided by Garn of Avalon's HP and NP gauge recovery, and those crit stars per turn that are the biggest factors in helping to push your team over the top, giving them more than just that quick little burst damage, giving them a sustainability that really made some of the most difficult challenges in the game a lot easier for newer players to tackle. There is, of course, Summer BB, and you know I'm talking about Faceless Moon. When I saw this thing drop on JP, it was insane, the response that it was getting. The ability to lock command cards, again, much like the crazy NP gain and HP recovery Merlin was able to provide to teams, this hadn't happened before. Something like this wasn't really on anybody's radar when they thought about what teams would be capable of. And while BB's fallen a little bit from grace, she still has a crazy mechanic that hasn't really been replicated very, very well. We've got, of course, Summer Artoria doing something similar with command card shuffles, but the command card lock in and of itself, that still remains fairly unique, fairly BB. I, of course, don't even have to mention to NA players the fact that we are still reeling from the release of Skahawk Scotty, Primordial Rune being the skill in particular. that quick crit damage boost really helped address Quick's problem. Its low damage, its low ability to actually kill. Having that as a portion of the kit allowed you to look at Quick damage dealers in an entirely different light. No longer were they just star generators. And having this tied to a critical damage increase just for one particular type of card, still very simple, but also not really something we had seen a lot of before. Space Ishtar is also, of course, about to do this on NA as well, with her ability to completely change her Noble Phantasm card type to suit the situation of the team. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what supporters you have. Space Ishtar is going to be able to function well as a farmer no matter what. This simple act of changing the Noble Phantasm's card type, up until this point, something we never would have thought would have been possible. But this different mechanic ends up pushing us forward. And of course, as a final example, I do have to mention Artoria Caster. Yes, a lot of her strength does come from the fact that she is able to provide the team with insane NP gauge and NP gain boosts from her multitude of skills. But again, in this servant, we also see something that is unique, different, something that we haven't seen before in the form of enforcement defense. An invincibility that completely ignores the ignore invincibility buff? Not something we would have ever considered. Who would have thought an evade could just ignore sure hit? Again, who would have thought an invincibility could ignore invincibility? But we see here with a brand new servant that is introduced something different, a different aspect of their kit that really ends up pushing them over the top and helping an overall team in some way. Now, with all of these examples provided, it is obvious that the same can be said for Fae Knight Lancelot. This ability to shift ascensions, change Noble Phantasm types, this isn't something that ever really would have occurred to us, but here it is staring us in the face. And this is a big deal. Whenever this happens in FGO, whenever this has happened, this has been a big deal, and we have sort of seen servants change and evolve, both new and old, as a way of looking at this new type of design that has ended up bleeding its way into the game. But what can this mean for FGO's future? This can really go one of two ways, and I've honestly seen both happen in the span of Fate Grand Order's life. Now, the first and worst way this could go is the obvious power creep problem, where Delightworks keeps introducing new units of increasing power with all of these new concepts applied to them, but solely focusing on releasing those new units, not necessarily going back and updating those old units in order to make them more in line with what this new standard of power is. Because whenever there's a new standard of power in a game, everyone, there is also a new standard of challenge. And if the designers don't end up addressing that, especially in a game where you can't have every single character, that ends up getting frustrating. I can easily provide an example that NA has seen recently in the form of Asclepius compared to Irisveal. Asclepius, if you have him on your team, really, he has made Irisveal obsolete. There is no reason to run Irisveal just because Asclepius provides better support in every single way, even though he is designed to do the same thing. This is a danger. This is a real fear that we have to keep an eye out for as a community, both NA and JP alike. Now, of course, what could also happen is the best case scenario. The best case scenario being that our characters end up receiving buffs that end up pulling them up to this new level of power, allowing it so older characters that players have had for a long time get to ascend to meet these brand new challenges. Is it necessarily the most profitable decision? No, not really. But is it the decision that will help retain your player base the best? Yes. Yes, it will. Now, for an example of this mindset in action, let's take a look at Osakabe Hime. When she initially came out, she was supposed to be the premier quick support. That was supposed to be what we were getting. But this package did not deliver. She did not arrive with the same standard of power that we were already seeing on NA at the time, and when Skahawk Scotty came out, she just completely and utterly eclipsed her. But after some time had passed and some buffs were applied, quite a lot of them actually, you ended up getting a servant with her own identity. A servant who could fit in comfortably as a quick or buster crit supporter. It didn't really matter the situation, she was prepared for it. She didn't end up being as optimal as either of the characters in those categories, but you still, after all of the buffs were said and done, were given a servant who could still compete on the same level. While not necessarily being the optimal pick, the meta pick, you still had a servant that could perform well, especially with players that did not necessarily have those truly optimal characters. And that is what you need to be shooting for in order to keep your game healthy. As far as which direction I see Delightworks heading, I honestly have a tendency to head towards the latter. Seeing all of the rank ups that have been on JP recently have me very, very hopeful. They are actually taking a look at those older servants and are giving them boosts to try to bring them up to that level of challenge that the game requires nowadays. That level of challenge that these later lost belts are going to require. They know that if your players can't even clear your most basic content, there is no reason for them to try the harder content. In fact, you've just got a better chance of those players dropping off. So we need to keep those old servants relevant, so if a player ends up pulling them, they are not just upset that they got something that is fundamentally useless. They can see that they have somebody they're going to be able to pull in and work with on a team. That was the point of the brand new friend point servants that NA got recently, and that is going to continue to be the point of every single rank up we see going forward. I'm really, really hopeful that the Lightworks is going to wake up and notice the competition that they have in the mobile sphere and are going to start changing, going to start turning things around, no longer being complacent at where they are right now. I really do feel like that these new ways of thinking, these new ways of releasing servants, these new mechanics that end up keeping these new characters interesting, not just from a writing standpoint, but also from a mechanical standpoint, that is going to be what helps retain players on the game. Characters that are not only fun to listen to, but characters that are fun to play with. I really just hope that they can keep the rank ups coming and keep thinking outside the box when it comes to servant mechanics. This is what DW is going to need to do in order to stay relevant in the years ahead. But of course, I want to know what you all think, so let me know what you think about Fae Knight Lancelot's kit down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the recent slew of rank ups that both NA and JP have received. Let me know if you think it's a good direction for the game to go going forward. And if you'd like to see some more extreme changes in Fate Grand Order, mention those as well. It's only by getting these ideas out in the open that we are going to be able to convey them. There's not necessarily a chance that Delightworks will listen to us, but they will if they know what is good for them. Speaking of which, if you want to talk more FGO, my Discord server is always open. Big thanks to the patrons on Patreon and the followers and subscribers on Twitch for the continued support. I really appreciate every single one of you. You're all great. You really are. Anyways, this is Kawaii50. I hope you all have a phenomenal day, and I'll see you all in the next video.